12:31. Right. We will now do roll call. President Guntert. Here. Vice President Bernatavitz is here. Secretary Lasorsa. Here. Treasurer Weddle. Here. Vice Treasurer Battisti. Here. Our Chief Justice will be late. Chief of Staff Belasny. Yes, Director of Community Outreach Alfahad. Here. Director of PR Pearl. Here. Senator Ahmed. Here. Senator Beyer. Present. Senator Candela. Here. Senator Chaput. Here. Senator Cortez. Here. Senator Fisher. Here. Senator Mavros. Here. Senator Novak. Yep. Senator Velez. Here. Senator Zapata. Here. Advisor George. Here. Advisor Wadsworth. Here. Webb. Here. CFB. Here. Wildcat Media. Here. Wildcat Esports. Here. Our SAC representative. Here. And ResLife. Here. All right. We will now move into the approval of our minutes and agenda. Is there any discussion on our minutes and agenda? Senator Novak.
I guess I'm yield to Wildcat Media.
I have a motion for swearing to be after reports. Do I have a second? Seconded by Senator Novak. Is there any discussion on the motion to move swear-ins to after reports? All right. Seeing as there is no discussion, we'll move into voting. All in favor, please raise your hand. All who oppose? And all who abstain. That passes 10-0-0. Is there any more discussion on the approval of our minutes and agenda? Senator Velez?
Motion to amend committee reports and add academic success and technology.
Do I have a second? Seconded by Senator Chaput. Is there any discussion on adding that to our reports? Seeing as there is no discussion, we'll move into voting. Does anyone oppose unanimous consent? All right, that passes. Is there any more discussion on our minutes and agenda? All right, seeing as there is no discussion, we will move into voting. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All who oppose? And all who abstain. That passes 9-0-1. We will now move into our announcements. There are no announcements. We have no guest speakers either. We will now move on to executive reports. Our president.
Hi, everyone. So this Friday, I have a meeting with our Dean of Students regarding the esports arena and maybe the future of esports. On Monday, I have a meeting with our Director of Facilities and UP to talk about getting an Amazon locker on campus, and that's what I've been working on. I yield.
Our president, no report. Our treasurer?
No report.
Our secretary? No report. Our chief of staff?
I did send out the SU gear form. I received 15 responses. I'm missing 5, so whoever did it, please do so. Thank you. I yield.
Now moving on to director reports. College Council?
Hi, everyone. There's a College Council meeting next week. Looking forward to it. I think it'll go really well. I'm hoping that our candidates for College Council will also be able to attend this meeting just to be able to, get a better idea of how College Council works and get introduced to the people that'll be attending. That's all from me. Thank you.
ResLife. Our Director of Community Outreach.
A guest speaker this afternoon, but that did fall through. However, we will have a few guest speakers coming up within the next couple of weeks, and I will work on keeping everyone posted. I did have several volunteering and community service opportunities. However, there is some issues that came up with transportation, which we are working on now. There are a few upcoming volunteer and community service hours to start on campus first to get a feel of how that will be, and as we're working on transitioning to providing transportation for everyone, and I will keep everyone posted with the events and the dates. I yield.
Our SAC rep. Our advisors. Oh, right. Our director of PR, do you have any reports?
We're hosting coffee houses in the lounge upstairs on Wednesday from 10:30 to 11:30. Everyone's welcome.
Our advisors. Right. Budget committee, do you have any reports?
Yeah, so last budget committee meeting went very well. We started looking at financial policy and just sort of going through all of that. We'll probably be continuing that this Friday, SU conference room, 2:30 p.m. till we finish. Please come. It'll be a lot of fun. Thank you.
Student Center Advisory.
Good afternoon, everyone. The Student Center Advisory Committee met last Thursday, February 6th, 2025. We discussed cleaning up the request for a pool wall cleaner, which will extend the life of the new fill. The progress on the new fill is we are hoping to hear back from the contractor on the schedule of it within this week. He was dealing with a personal issue, so we're going to give him 1 week. And if I don't hear back from them, we will be seeking to find a new contractor to do the fill repair. We are also still waiting for the HDMI cables for the game room to come in, and we ordered an additional one so that it can be used as backup for anywhere it needs to be used in the SC. We will be having another meeting today in the SU conference room at 5 p.m. I hope to see you all there.
Wellness and inclusion. Food committee.
I just want to apologize. The meeting that I had set for this week was had to be canceled due to some time conflict. I'm working with them to get it sorted out. So I yield.
Safety and facilities.
We had a meeting last week. We're meeting bi-weekly in the SGU conference room upstairs on Fridays at 11 to 12. We talked about a few things around campus too, regarding the Amazon lockers, the mats in the campus center, and a few little minor things around campus. I yield.
Policy committee. Hey guys, just so you know, our meetings are on Monday at 6. We did have our first meeting. It was a very last minute decision to host it this past Monday. But yeah, I hope to see you guys there if you're interested in discussing policy. I yield. And student success and technology.
Finally have a meeting date every Thursday from 4 to 5 in the SGU conference room. We would love to hear your complaints about anything regarding your learning experience. So, yeah, please be there.
Moving on to org reports. Web.
Hi, everybody. Web, have a really good week so far this week. We had our speed puzzling on Tuesday. That was a really big hit for a pop-up event. Tonight we have our anti-Valentine's Day event from 7 to 9. We've got stamp carving, stuffed animals, cookies that you can decorate as well, so please come to that. Don't forget, we have every Friday till March 28th, our Free Ski Fridays, and then this weekend from the 14th through the 16th, we have our free movie at Rome Cinemas. It's the new Captain America movie. So thank you. I yield.
CFB.
So progressing through EFRs as normal, freezing resolution for clubs that missed 2 consecutive CFB meetings on this week's agenda. I yield back.
Wildcat Media. Wildcat Esports.
Wildcat Esports is ramping up planning for Frag Fest. We're looking to get the majority pricing for the PRs done by the end of the month. We're also happy to announce that we're going to be working with the Wellness Center to provide some goodies that are hygiene-based for any students that might be staying there for a long time, need to freshen up or forgot to freshen up beforehand. We hope to see you all there after spring break. And as the president stated, tomorrow there's going to be a meeting regarding the esports arena and possibly relocating it. We're hoping to find a location that can be a little bit more permanently intertwined and closer with students.
That concludes reports. Now moving into swear-ins. If you're being sworn in today, please come to the middle of the horseshoe. Come closer.
All right, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name. Will faithfully uphold. The student government at Utica Constitution. And carry out the duties of. State your organization and position. Are y'all factor times? Yeah. Okay, then factor times and then whatever your position is. To the best of my ability.
To the best of my ability.
And will represent the students of SUNY Poly.
And will represent the students of SUNY Poly.
In a fair and unbiased manner.
In a fair and unbiased manner.
All right, congratulations. Come up here and sign this sheet, wherever it is, and you'll be all set.
All right. Since that concludes swear-ins, we will move into old business. Bill 2425-04, Senator Byer.
Motion to accept Senate Bill number 2425-04.
Do I have a second? Seconded by Senator Chaput.
We, the members of the student government at Utica of SUNY Poly, as represented in the Senate, do hereby enact as follows. The purpose of this bill is to modify the Club Funding Board's policies and procedures to match the de facto operating processes of the Club Funding Board.
Is there any discussion on the CFB bill? Senator Mavros.
So this is a question prior to the treasurer or CFB. One of the things you change with this bill is how EFRs are handled. Previously, you mentioned that they're on a first-come, first-served basis. After this goes into effect, it will be on a need-based basis. And how would you determine need-based basis on a fair and unbiased manner? I yield.
I can't see if... okay, CFB.
So, Willie, we've started doing this already regardless of the policies because we've been, due to the limited amount of funds you have, we can't just do a first-come, first-served basis. It's just unpractical nowadays with the current amount of clubs. So we meet with the clubs, see what they want to do, how they're spending the money, how will that benefit either the club or the school, and then judge it off of those parameters. So like if the club is always in debt and constantly be bailed out, we're going to be less likely to give them more money to spend more if they can't even manage the money they do have. Then also regarding trips, like if they can advertise the school at these events, say, oh, SUNY probably attended like a rocket event in Alabama, we'll give them money for it. But and other stuff, we'll have more questions regarding those incidents. Are you back to the chair?
Senator Novak.
So, since you just mentioned trips, I just have a question for you. In the past, the school has, this might sound off topic, but it's not, I just want to point that out quickly. So in the past, the school has failed our IMGD students when it comes to providing access to the game developer conference in California, which is a very important networking opportunity for IMGD majors, and instead this responsibility has been put onto the Game Design Club to fund and host. And one of the problems we always had with that is we've never had enough funding to send all the game design students who want to go to this important once-in-a-lifetime networking opportunity, especially since we focus on sending seniors or people who will graduate in fall because it happens in spring, and we're not going to send, people who still have a long time. But with this new needs-based, service, how would that affect the Game Design Club trying to send people to the Game Design Conference?
Attend the event will be a total cost. Because like she said, it depends on the cost to travel to the event, the cost to put the students up. Because then we only can hand out $5,000. So if this event's in California, that's 4 students, 4 round-trip flight tickets, a hotel, travel expenses be over the expected amount. So that would then revolve to this body to ask for more money. You're back to the jail.
Is there any more discussion on the CFB policies and procedures refresh? Wow, I'm surprised. All right. Sorry. Our advisors.
I have a quick question for CFB. So one of the things that I noticed when looking through this is that the only mention of a specific person that's responsible for line transfers, whether that's activation, extra funding, anything like that, is it was removed from the contract, and now it just states that they have to work with the SGU treasurer on that. Who is then responsible for it? Is it the SGU treasurer that's responsible for the line transfer? Is it still a club funding board member? I was just wondering if you could clarify. I yield to CFB.
I would believe it should go as we currently do them now. So we would get together, we would have a blanket transfer sheet. You would just punch the names and send it off to the treasurer to then handle the actual transfer of the funds. There's no dedicated wall currently, at least at the current CFB board. We all fill it out whenever we have the chance to. The current schedule only have time to fill out. Have one dedicated person to these forms and one dedicated person to another set of forms. We just fill in where there's a gap. Is that okay? I yield to the treasurer.
I do want to direct your attention to Article 3, Section 8. The CFB president must notify the requesting club and the SGU treasurer within 5 business days after the extra funding request has finally been approved or denied, and then it adds on a little more if it was denied. It's essentially the SGU treasurer is responsible for processing pretty much every single line transfer. They're required to sign off on it along with the SGU advisor, and typically they're the one that brings it to auxiliary services, unless it requires further administrative review. So I don't think you need a role dedicated to filling out a form, which is maybe a couple of minutes to fill out. I'm going to yield to Priscilla.
We brought this up during the pro temp meeting, but I just thought maybe, I'm not sure if we can do this as an amendment quickly, but in the past couple of years, so give or take 2 to 4 years, I think, CFB has been running their requirements for semester, for events and fundraisers and community service for clubs as yearly instead of semesterly. And to my knowledge, with these new policies and procedures, it's planned to go back to semesterly, at least this has been explained to me. So I think we should quickly amend Appendix A just to quickly put down, hey, these are semesterly based requirements instead, just that way clubs don't get confused. Because I know some of our seasonal clubs, despite what you might think, they do activate in fall, and that's because they have to. For example, to my knowledge, ski and snowboarding club, despite the fact they can't do anything until the spring semester, has to activate in November. Otherwise, they can't buy season passes for the skiing resorts they go to, because the ski resorts stop selling season passes by mid-December, and the club clearly can't, buy those season passes if they're not up and running and they don't have their funding. Which is also maybe a concern about doing it as semester instead of yearly that may pop up, is those clubs that have to be active in fall even though they're semesterly, because they have to buy something back in the fall, so that way when it comes to the season they can do their activity, they can actually do their activity.
Just for clarification, did you want to motion that amendment now, or did you want to hold off?
I guess I wanted to if we are going to move it back to semesterly, I want to amend it so that way it's clarified for clubs. But at the same time, I still think we should keep it yearly, just because of the seasonally. It kind of screws over our seasonal clubs that have to activate in the fall, because if they don't activate, they can't do purchase requests. And they can't do purchase requests. That's their entire club gone. Because again, ski and snowboard has, emphasis on has, to buy these season passes before January.
Okay, let me be a little, let me rephrase. Are you making that motion to amend Appendix A right now?
No.
I just wanted to.
We should discuss the requirements being semesterly first.
Okay, I see. Got it, okay. Senator Mavris.
Just for clarification, where is this exactly?
Appendix A?
On the copy I have, Appendix A is stricken out.
Directly below it, there are the, I'm going to yield to our president.
Oh, yeah, I asked our treasurer about that, because I was confused too. It's just that little table there below it. So Appendix A is 99% struck through, but it's just that table at the bottom. Yeah, I yield.
Is there any more, our advisors?
So I have another question for CFB. Section 2.10.0 It was struck out that the clubs should post on the sponsored web application for marketing their general events and fundraisers. It also struck out the 2 weeks, so it's just in advance. What is to prevent clubs from posting a flyer or posting on Engage an hour before an event where students might not be able to see it? That might be part one of my question. And then part two is, it's noted that clubs should still be submitting an event confirmation form, but the event confirmation form was struck out. Is there another section where the information that would have been within the event confirmation form is within the other parts of the policies? I'm going to yield to CFB.
The first part, so they'll say they have to follow the SGU policies, and I believe that's a wider issue, as I've seen events in Donovan by clubs that are an hour beforehand. So like I've seen it was beginning of last semester, it was a Python event. We got notification 2 hours after the event ended that there was an event. So there's already current problems with the current system, so I don't believe changing it to SGU policies will have a major effect. And as far as the second question, which section was that under? For the second part of the question?
Are
Sorry,
you
I'm
referring to the event confirmation form?
Yeah, on Engage, the event, yeah, sorry.
So they would submit it on Engage?
Yeah, at least to my understanding of policies, yep.
Our president.
So I guess just food for thought. If Engage was more configurable, maybe we could disallow events to be created in some time frame. I don't know the limitations or extent of what Engage can do, but if we were able to limit it to events cannot be created unless they are 2 weeks away or more, then that would maybe limit some of that from happening. I don't know how to speak on behalf of clubs putting events in, an hour or two after they happen. That seems like a really big issue. But I don't think there's anything specifying that clubs should be frozen or reprimanded by not following that policy. And I yield to our treasurer.
I'd like to just add that a lot of clubs are run by students, right? And students should be planning out their events in advance for certain. But if a club decides, hey, we want to host an event next Friday and it's Thursday of the week before, I don't think they should be disallowed from doing that. I think the 2-week policy is a good policy to have, and especially if they're giving out free things, if they're giving out prizes, that's already covered elsewhere in our policies, that it has to be advertised for a certain amount of time. By basically yielding instead to the SGU policies, it ensures that events that are giving out prizes, giving out anything really, need to be advertised for 2 weeks. That's still secure. It's just that if a club wants to run a meeting, if they want to run a hackathon, but they didn't start planning 2 weeks before, they started planning 13 days before, they can still do so. Regarding the second point, our CFB president is absolutely correct that it's covered by Engage. It's mandated per section 2.8 that clubs must submit a post-event confirmation form within 2 weeks. I'm going to yield.
Our audience member. CFB, did you want to respond?
Particular?
I feel this for a lot of clubs, but I run as president for the Creativity Club and the Dance Club.
Okay.
Which I had problems with being frozen for meetings not being submitted, which was a technical error, which we had found for multiple other clubs having the same problem. And even after that was resolved, we were still frozen anyway.
I was in locations where I was actually representing my club, and I thought that was not appropriate when I was talking with my club as being president.
Yeah.
And I have those concerns. I feel like I
Okay.
Is there any more discussion on the CFB bill? Our president.
So I'm going to ask our audience member. How do you think we could better communicate with the clubs so that we can get input on what they think about this?
CFP meetings. That's what they are there for. And so when policies are before they're being made, when they're being discussed, I think CFP should be completely adamant and clear with what is happening, not offering to clubs that we could be shown them. Because we were offered, and I did say yes, I do want to see them, and I still have not seen any policy changes. I think CFP should be the time, since we meet weekly, whenever changes are being discussed or made, we should be notified then and there.
Wildcat Media.
Can I motion to table this bill for a week?
We have a motion to table this bill for a week, seconded by Senator Fisher. Wildcat Media.
I just wanted to say I feel like this bill should go back, be shown before the next Senate meeting to CFB, and then could be brought to the table again based on what happens at the CFB meeting. I yield to the president.
Are you looking to table it back to the authors or table it for a week to come back next meeting?
Is it, so if I table for a week, can there be amendments to it, or no?
No.
Table it back to the authors.
Okay.
No, you essentially, when you table it for a week, you just move back discussion and voting for a week. If you table it back to the authors, then you to basically remove it from the
Okay.
table, give it back to the authors, and they can change.
I
and-
motion to table it back to the authors.
Point of order, could you?
I rescind my first motion, and now I now table it back to the authors.
Thank you. Seconded by Senator Novak. Is there any discussion on this motion? Senator Novak.
So I want to point out, I did bring this up like for the last 2 weeks that this bill was never shown to the clubs, and I feel like this is positive, this is evidence that this was in fact not shown to the clubs. So I feel like if we were following the training we got during Leadership Development Day, the ethical option here is tabling it back to the authors, so that way the clubs can then look at it. Because even if it was shown for a second, if it was not properly gone over, because when I was doing CFE meetings, we would spend 15 minutes going over the policy changes that we passed last spring before we passed them. And I feel like something like that should be done again, where it takes up the majority of the CFE meeting, because after all, we are making policies that impact these clubs, so we should make sure we have the consent of the clubs, because if we are a democracy, even if a representative one, we should make sure we have the consent of the governed. Yield.
Our treasurer.
I would just like to point out that the CFB policies that we currently have are very outdated, right? That's the main reason this legislation was brought to the table. These policies are not set in stone. You can make motions to amend them on the floor, or if passed, they can be amended again. You just have to introduce a new bill. CFB is currently in violation of its policies. They've distributed about $13,000 that they did not have the authority to do so, and if these policies don't pass until we get an extra funding council established, I don't think any clubs are going to receive extra funding. I don't know how long it'll take to get that set up, to get those people sworn in into those roles. Given they're not stipended, I think we might have some difficulty filling those roles. I'm not sure that this is the best course of action to take. I'm going to yield to our CFB president.
This is not a complete rewrite, they're merely a modernization of the previous policies. Another note regarding the communication, I always ask every meeting, any questions, do anyone want to see the policies? No response, no interaction. And many clubs fail to show up as well to these meetings, which is why I've been freezing several clubs. And I will have more resolutions in the future freezing clubs for failure to attend. Yield to advisor.
I appreciate the work that's gone into these. I do think there's probably some ways to improve, which would be to maybe send it to the clubs ahead of time and then ask for feedback at next week's meeting. I think that would be great. But I do want to echo my co-advisor's sentiments about some of the changes that are made, because we keep saying that it's just bringing them current, but it doesn't feel that way when things are being explicitly changed and telling the clubs that they refer back to SGU policy. We always refer back to SGU policy, but having explicit guidelines in these policies makes it clearer and more manageable for clubs to be successful. So taking away the requirement that they need 2 weeks to advertise an event it seems wild to me. These are student activities fees getting put into action, and every student should have acknowledgement and awareness that how they're being used, and if they want to participate, even if they're not a club member, but they think that sounds really cool, I'm going to go to that because I can, because every club is open to every student. They need to have the time to be able to prepare to attend those, to make arrangements in their schedule. We should absolutely not be allowing clubs to post an hour or two before their event, or even a day or two before their event. Everything needs to be processed ahead of time. Any vouchers have to be in 2 weeks ahead of time. Every event has to be in 2 weeks ahead of time, and that is for transparency. And if you're looking for transparent leadership, which I keep hearing that you are, this is the way to do it. I don't think that you should give them an out and not hold them strictly to their policies. And this is not an update, this is a change. I yield.
Our president.
I just want to point out really quick, section 1.3.0 in the rewritten policies includes what the business meetings for CFB will include. Those are the weekly meetings that happen in the theater. I'm just going to abbreviate a little bit. It's how to run a club, best practices for a club, and any updates CFB sees fit. That's in the rewrite. In the current standing policies, there's nothing actually specifying what happens during this meeting except for distributing information. So I'm not saying that it's right. I'm not saying that it's wrong, but it could be a lot more clear on what should be in those CFB meetings with the previous policies or these proposed ones. I yield.
I'm going to yield to our not yield. I'm going to call in our audience member, but real quick, could you speak into the mic a little bit more? It's a little bit hard to hear. And when you're done, there's someone else behind you who also wants to speak. Anyways, thank you. You're good to go. No, you're good.
Hearing you say yes by responding, yes, okay.
Good. All right.
Our president.
So I know it's a little bit late because the CF meeting happened like an hour ago, but can I ask you for next meeting, can you go over the policies that we have just a little quickly, because I know it's only a half-hour meeting, go over what's currently there, go over maybe what changes we're trying to make, and see what the clubs have to say about it? And I yield to our CFB.
Funding requests until we get a council in place. They want us to fully adhere to the policies that were in place. I yield back to the chair.
Our audience member.
Hi. When it comes to events on Engage,
Sure.
I'd just like some clarification on whether the 2-week notice applies to events that should be being way pre-planned and are using club money for prizes or some larger event. Because as clubs, we've been informed that we should be making our club meetings Engage events. And that making a 2-week requirement would prevent any small changes that we need to make with meeting times and stuff. So I would just like some clarification on that.
Our advisors.
So it's really just like general events and fundraisers. If you have you should always have a standing meeting time, right? Like maybe we meet every Thursdays at 12:30, right? So that's in there. If you need to shift that, edits can certainly be made. But just a heads up that these happens every week in this place at this time. I think that makes the most sense. But it is, the 2 weeks is also very much for any events and fundraisers and that sort of thing that would be inclusive of all students.
Sure. I was just making sure nothing
Yeah. No, you can edit. I mean, we know that things come up, but just giving a heads up is helpful. Mm-hmm. I yield.
Our treasurer.
I'd like to point out that a general event is basically, it's an event, right? It's a club event, and quoting from the old CFP policies, an event's purpose is to highlight, inform, or celebrate the purpose of the club. As our advisors pointed out, currently those events do need to be advertised 2 weeks in advance. So any club meeting, for example, the purpose of which is to highlight, celebrate, or inform about the club, would have to be, made notice of 2 weeks in advance. So if you had to move a meeting date a week in advance, then it wouldn't really qualify as a general event. That would no longer be something you could, consider as an event. And I do just want to echo our CFB president. I don't think that, I think they were looking mostly to move forward, right? The old policies that we have they're not perfect. They're far from it. They're fairly dated. I understand changes were introduced with these policies. If we want to, we are able to amend this legislation on the floor. That is very doable. And I also just want to reiterate that the $13,000 that was given out in extra funding was given out of compliance in these policies. And that was, probably a mistake on my part, probably a mistake on our advisor's part for ever signing off on those line transfers. I certainly plan to hold myself better accountable for these line transfers, and if we're remaining with the old CFP policies and procedures, I will wait until we have an extra funding council to approve any extra funding requests. I'm going to yield to media.
All right. We have a call to question, seconded by Senator Novak.
I wasn't raising my hand for that.
Yeah, the motion was to table this back to the authors. Right. So there is a call to question. That needs a second, right? Yep. Do we have a second? Seconded by Senator Fisher. We will now vote on whether or not we do a call to question. All in favor, please raise your hand. All who oppose? And all who abstain? Right, that, I'm going to do a revote because this was very mixed. Also, can you guys do me a favor and really put your hands up high just so it's easier to count? As high as you can, please, for me, without being obnoxious. All who are in favor of the call to question, please raise your hand. All who oppose? And all who abstain. Right. It needs a majority pass, right? Or is it 2/3?
It passes either way.
Oh, it doesn't matter. That passes 5-1-3. Right, so we will now move into voting for the motion to table this for a week.
No, to the author. Point of order.
Oh, yes, sorry, to the author. Thank you. All in favor of tabling this to the author, please raise your hand. All who oppose? Sure, I'll start over again. Just to be clear, we are voting on the motion to table this back to the author. Is that clear for everyone? Okay, awesome, thank you. All right, all in favor, please raise your hand. All right, all who oppose? And all who abstain. All right, that passes 6-1-2. We will now move on to new business. Senator Novak, what's up?
I had something very important to mention before we table the question. Called the question now.
Point of order.
Yeah, we already did.
Outside of it. I'm sorry.
We just tabled this back to the authors, so we have to.
Solution to the extra funding council and.
Well, send us an email. Let us know because we can work on it and just deal with that.
because in the past, CFB normal executives were the extra funding council. The extra funding council wasn't an extra position. It was.
So
everyone-
I'm sorry, I'm gonna cut you off. We have to move on now. I'm sorry. We called the question, so it's out of order, basically. I apologize. Senator Candela, what's up?
Can I ask what Dan?
12:45.
For the last thing.
Um,
I don't know how that is.
Just point of information. You said there was, that total was only 9 out of the 10 people that were supposed to be
Yeah.
voting.
Because I thought he abstained and you and Jason abstained, so that should be 3 abstains.
Yeah, Jason did abstain too.
okay, so this is also why I asked you guys to please put your hands up, because if I don't see them, I can't count it. Please, I'm so sorry. If I missed you, I apologize.
What was the vote on that?
I got rid of it. What was the vote? Kaylee, do you have it? 613. So that is 9. So I did miss someone. I apologize.
No, 613 is 10.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Never mind. I didn't miss somebody. Well, thank you guys. Sorry, I might have just misspoke.
That's, so should that not be, shouldn't that be 1 or 1?
6 plus 1 plus 3 is.
There should be 3 people that abstain.
Yeah.
And that's the third category. Didn't you just say 2?
No, 613.
Oh, okay,
No, no, you're good.
No, it's okay. I might have misspoke too. I apologize if that was the case, but it was 613. No, you're fine. All right. So now we're moving on to the new business, this time for sure. Bill Resolution 2425-26, Senator Chaput.
Motion to accept resolution number 2425-26.
Do I have a second? Oh, thank you. All right, feel free to read.
All right. We, the Senate of SUNY Poly Student Government at Utica, do hereby resolve whereas all organizations under and including the student government at Utica have requested additional funding, and the SGU treasurer has conservatively calculated that over $50,000 from the fiscal year will go into reserves on June 30th, and so the Budget Committee wishes to pull funds to support student programming and activities with the understanding that it will be replenished at the end of this fiscal year, as well as earmark funds to support Wildcat Esports arena relocation, and so therefore be it enacted, the student...
Since this is a bill, you don't need to read all the way
my
through.
bad, sorry.
Oh, never mind. Sorry, I messed up. Keep going. I apologize.
Therefore be enacted, the student government at Utica Senate considers and confirms the transfer of $40,000 from reserves into an account dedicated to upgrades to facilitate the esports arena if and when it is relocated to the student center, expiring on the 1st of January 2026. $30,000 from reserves into Webb's Apocalypse Week line for better funding the program during Apocalypse Week. $7,000 from reserves into Wildcat Esports gaming equipment line for funding upgraded peripherals within the esports arena. $7,000 from reserves within Wildcat Media's studio equipment line, both as is devoid of funds due to lately processed invoices and to support media's desire to purchase 2 4K streaming camcorders. $5,000 from reserves into CFB's extra funding request line for supporting additional funding requests from clubs. And the student government at Utica's Senate considers and confirms the transfers of $89,000 from reserves. Therefore, be it resolved. Be it resolved, the student organizations listed above will receive additional funding to better support their missions. And be it finally resolved, $89,000 will be transferred out of reserves. Attachments include a brief overview of reserves pool, stipulations for the $40,000, breakdown of Webb's reserve pool request, breakdown of Wildcat Esports reserve pool request, breakdown of Wildcat Media's reserve pool request, and breakdowns of CFB's reserve pool request.
Right. Our treasurer.
I just wanted to speak briefly for myself and Budget Committee on this resolution a bit. I view this resolution as sort of being 2 different parts, right, this reserves pool. $49,000 of it is to support student programming. The reason we are pulling this amount of money to support student programming during 1 year is because we cut our budget this year. We cut our budget by a lot. We didn't allocate over $20,000. We cut from a lot of programming lines, and I mean, you can see from the calculations in the first attachment, we're expecting about $50,000 to $60,000 to go into reserves right now. That's not counting, the small things that just don't get spent. Whatever stipended positions that we don't fill this semester, all of those will go into reserves, so on and so forth. That's why I feel comfortable as both the chair of Budget Committee and a representative of Budget Committee pulling $49,000 for student programming, which really only supports the students now, because it'll be replenished by everything that goes back into reserves at the end of the year. The other piece of this reserves pool is the $40,000 to upgrade the student center facilities to better support an esports arena. Esports currently has 14 high-powered gaming PCs. They draw a lot of power. The student center electrical system within this building would require upgrades to facilitate this, so that $40,000 is meant to be earmarked for it. That is money that would likely not be replenished at the end of the year when everything goes into reserves. However, if unspent, it'll return to reserves 1st of January 2026. If part of it gets spent, anything that doesn't get spent will also return to reserves 1st of January 2026. And that, I feel, is appropriate because we're making a significant upgrade to the campus to support one of our organizations and to support all of our students going forwards. It's not a temporary thing like event programming. It's something that supports our students, until we make another upgrade or until something changes. If you have any questions, I do strongly encourage that all of you read through the overview page as well as the breakdown of each organization's request. I hope most questions could be answered within those, though of course everyone's read the agenda before the meeting. I'm going to yield back to the chair.
Senator Candela.
All right, I have one question. For the line that is the one that's 30,000 for web, is that line number 2 under enacted technically? Because it's bullet point number 2, or is that line number 4?
I would say the former. So I would say that it's line 2, just because it's, or maybe line 1, sub 2. I don't know. Could I have some help, please? Oh, thank you.
So it's
1.2, essentially.
okay. Motion to change line 1 sub 2 to state, which takes $30,000 from reserves into web's Apocalypse week line for better funding the programming during Apocalypse week to $35,000 from reserves line into web's Apocalypse week line for better funding for the programming during Apocalypse week.
All right, so we have a motion to increase Webb's funding. Do I have a second? All right, seconded by Senator Mavros. We will now move into discussion on increasing Webb's funding. Is there any discussion? Senator Chaput?
Can we get Webb's input on this increase of $5,000?
Yeah, so we actually talked about this. So this would go towards more Carnival Day for getting you guys more rides. The extra 5,000 would help with, last year we had an Avengers ride, a swings ride, slides, and one other one. That's the Avengers ride, Asa.
I don't know what it's called. It's
Okay, yes. We want to add more so you guys can have more fun on that day. And Preston and I have talked about it, the Budget Committee have talked about it, and this would really help for Carnival Day specifically. I yield to our treasurer.
And I just want to add that Budget Committee's policy and my own personal philosophy when approaching this, if we're doing reserves pool to support student programming during the current year, the amount should not exceed the amount that we realistically expect to go into reserves. This change would mean that we would be drawing $54,000 to support student programming. We are conservatively expecting $58,000 to $60,000, so we would still, for this portion of the reserves pool, end in a net gain within our reserves. I yield to the chair.
All right, Senator Novak.
Just one question, because I know it was mentioned in Budget Committee, I think, like 2 weeks ago, I think that was when I was there, that at Carnival Day last year, there were concerns about the safety of the zip line, like not having enough padding there. Will that budget, I'm not sure if it's even up to you guys, up to the zip line company or whatever, Will that also go into making sure those like that safety, like this money, make sure that safety not safety requirements, but it is more safe and those concerns are gone?
So because of safety, me and my team have decided to not bring back a zip line. We will be bringing back something bigger instead, and we will make sure that there is safety for each ride. To the floor.
Is there any more discussion on the motion to increase Webb's funding from 30,000 to 35,000? Senator Velez.
Even with the additional 5,000, would this still be a scale down from last year?
Yes.
Okay.
We should still keep it under what we did. We did last year 58,000, and we'd still be keeping it under.
Just a quick note, I would also like to remind you guys to please yield when you're done speaking, or yield to a specific person when you're done speaking. Thank you. No, you're good. It's not just you. It's just gotten a little bit off track. Right. Is there any more discussion on the motion to increase Webb's funding? Our advisors.
I guess I don't even know where to start. I have a lot of thoughts. And I love Webb, so it's nothing against Webb. I love what you do. I think that what you do is critical to student retention and experience, and it's lovely. I just think sometimes throwing more and more money at something doesn't necessarily make it better. When we are like this, I don't know if it's going to be voted on today or if it'll be tabled. With this amount on the table, I'm not sure if I agree that it should be voted on in one day, but we're already in February and we're like 8 weeks out maybe from Carnival Day and Apocalypse Week. It's coming in really fast, and typically contracts for these types of events are done in the fall prior to leaving, and I have a lot of concerns about trying to pull things off in such a short amount of time when it's so large scale. I mean, this is big stuff. It's exciting stuff. It's good stuff, and what you already have is probably still excellent. I'm sure whatever you have already contracted is excellent, and I just don't know if throwing more money at it is going to make it that much better. Last year was lovely and insane and huge, but there's so many things outside of our control. Like the weather last year was not helpful. Like the wind was crazy and it was troublesome, and we have no control over that. So I guess my question would be, what is the backup plan? I think we would love to see like a really concrete plan of what specifically we'd be bringing, what the backup plan would be, what the backup location would be. I know that we typically call the event a couple days before, depending on whether like, are we going for it or are we shifting to our backup plan on such a big day? And typically when there's a shift to the backup plan, things get swapped out. So the promises of like the bigger and better rides might not necessarily be able to be executed. So I just wonder, I guess all of those things, and you may not have those answers today, and I totally understand if you don't, but I think it bears the question. I yield back to the chair.
Thank you. I would like to point out that there is a pretty extensive breakdown of like everything that's here just in the back. Okay, I just wanted to. No, you're good. You could. Yeah, you have the floor.
Specifically, I think I read that. Yep. So I'm talking specifically about Carnival Day.
Got it. Okay.
And what that day would look like, because, I mean, for anyone who was here last year, I know many of us weren't, like, the big rides, right? Like, if we were to move inside, we can't do that in here. The Student Center won't allow for it. The field house is probably offline because baseball season, softball season, indoor practices, we've had a hard time being able to secure that location in the past. If you have, that's awesome, but we've had trouble, and I'm not trying to, everyone's got eyes going in all the directions, and I'm not trying to, this is our job. We have to do this for the students, so I'm not trying to bring anybody down, but these questions should be asked. I yield.
Thank you. I just want to say that I appreciate you asking the question. I'm going to yield to Webb.
For one thing, if the rides are canceled inside, it will either be in here or the field house. Me and Gumby have been in talks with doing that. We will have axe throwing, a rage room, the paint splatter room again. We are talking about bringing in either the paint splatter room or the paint party. It's a bit of a mix-up right now. That was actually just talked about in our meeting. We will also be having the caricatures again, the henna. We will be having the sign people come back so you can create your own sign. So if rides are out, we will still have things for people to do indoors. I would just like to state that. So I yield to our treasurer.
I have a question for our advisor. I'm looking at the Carnival Day contract from last year, and it looks like it was signed April 19th, 2024. The actual event happened the following day. I understand, obviously, there's a big difference between, one day and a couple of months, and obviously we don't want to be signing contracts that soon in advance. This one certainly seems to have been rushed through. Possibly one of our other advisors could provide some more clarification on that. But I frankly don't think that 2.5 months is rushed. I am confident in Webb, I'm confident in its team, and I think we can certainly figure this out within 2.5 months. I think saying it's too late, we shouldn't pull this money, we don't even know what we're going to do with it, is the wrong approach to take. We're trying to provide programming to students. We want this to be planned out, we want this to be ready. Life gets in the way, it happens, and Webb has been working on this, from my understanding, since last semester. They've been planning, they've been thinking about it, they pretty much have a breakdown of this week. The problem is, they don't know how much funding they're going to get. And that makes it very challenging to plan. They're asking for additional funding because they want to better support the students. They're asking for additional funding because they got $58,000 last year for Carnival Day, and this year they were allocated 40, of which they only have 32. I don't think it's an unreasonable request. And just a point of clarification to the chair, are we still in the discussion to add $5,000 to Webb's reserves pool?
Yes.
Then I'm going to move for a call to question.
All right. All in favor of a call? Oh, you need a so moved. Right. Okay. Thank you. Do I have a so moved for the call to question? So moved by Senator Candela. Do I have a second? Seconded by Senator Fisher. Please, if all in favor of going into a call to question, please raise your hand. All who oppose? And all who abstain? That passes 7-1. We will now move into voting on the motion to increase Webb's funding from $30,000 to $35,000. All in favor, please raise your hand. All who oppose? And all who abstain? That passes 8-2. All right. We will now move on into discussion of the resolution as a whole. Is there any more discussion?
Just quickly, I think, I know it's not really about the bill, but like the bill's attachments. The breakdown of the CFB requests, those colors was kind of like way too similar, and then they were kind of hard to see for me, at least on my tiny screen. So I guess I know we can't change it now, but I guess in the future can we use more distinct coloring, please?
Yeah. All right. We will now move back into discussion for the resolution as a whole. Senator Candela.
I would like to motion to change the lines that, I don't know what lines these are, I'm sorry. That's lines that say the total money that's being given out in this reserve pool have to be changed now that we've changed this other money, right? I guess it's more of a question than motion.
I'm gonna. So, what Senator Candela is asking is if we need a motion to change line 1, subsection 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh wait, no, never mind. Sorry, wrote the bullet points wrong. What Senator Candela is asking is if we have to change line 2 under enacted from 89,000 to 94,000 since we just increased Webb's. Yeah, you would have to.
Okay, so.
You can motion it.
Sorry, what line is that?
I'm gonna call on our president.
Can I entertain a motion to update all instances of 89,000 to $94,000?
Do I have a so moved? So moved. Thank you. Do I have a second? Seconded by Senator Novak.
Because I didn't really hear, it was kind of quick.
Yeah, you're good. What was asked
from
was
84 to
the motion to change all instances of 89,000 to 94,000. All right, we are now in discussion on that motion. Is there any discussion needed. All right. We will now move into voting. Does anyone oppose unanimous consent? All right, that passes. We are now back onto the resolution as a whole. Is there any more discussion? Senator Chaput.
They aren't like fully met, we'll just go back into the reserves, correct? So
Yes.
like even if that 35,000 that is now allocated to web isn't fully met at 35,000, they'll still go back into reserves afterwards?
Yes, and that is the
Ideal.
same for everything
Yeah.
on here. It doesn't matter if it's like the entire thing or if it's $1, it'll go back into reserves if it's not used. Our advisor.
I have a couple things. First of all, Grayson, in response to what you were saying, yes, that contract was not signed, but I was not in the role then, and that will not, absolutely will not happen. We also did not have insurance the day of on the rides, which is incredibly problematic, and will also not happen again. Like, will not. What? Yeah, I do very much remember all of those things, and it won't continue. So we'll be sure to make sure all of our I's are dotted and T's are crossed before I move forward with any payment or any allowance of people coming onto campus and putting our students at risk. So that's the first thing. Second, it's hard to make a statement that says that Webb didn't know how much money they had to plan because they absolutely were giving an allotment. So that until they were given something else, that's how much money they had. So they absolutely knew how much money they had to plan with, and hopefully were planning within that amount until given permission otherwise, which they still have not been given permission yet because we have not voted on this. So they do know how much were given. They have a budget that was voted on by the Senate and approved by the president of the campus. Furthermore, I have a couple of questions for the group about the esports line. I think it's a great vision, and I'm really supportive of it. So I want to start there. I think it's great. A couple things that we had talked about in our meeting, Grayson, when we first started talking about this. The first, well, like under enacted, that first bullet, and then the listing. So that first bullet in the list saying that it's going to go, the $40,000 will go into an account dedicated to upgrading the facility. It doesn't indicate where that account is, which I think we had talked about a location, but I don't know if that's still the vision or if something has shifted since we spoke. And then second, all of the details that go along with that would need to be included in this document. So I appreciate the notation of like when it would expire. Like if it's not utilized by that date, it would have to come back to SGU, and I think that's a really great start. But there are a lot of other details that would need to come along with that to facilitate a really clean process of where that money is going, and if that money is going where we had originally discussed, which would potentially be the foundation. Have you talked to the foundation? Do they know this is happening, and are they agreeable to the same terms that you're outlining here? I yield.
Our treasurer.
A couple of things there. First, regarding Webb, they did know that the budget was for $40,000, of which they only have $32,000 because invoices were not processed until August, and they were made aware that a reserves pool was going on the table. They were made aware that a reserves pool was going on the table, and per our policies, they had the right to come and ask for money, and consequently, they're looking at a range of either $32,000 for Apocalypse Week or now $67,000. That's a big range. It's very hard to plan around all that. It's hard to plan an event when you don't know if you're getting 100% of the funding you're asking for or 50%. It's very difficult to plan within that, and I think Webb is doing the best they can. With regards to the esports arena, this was originally written to give the money to the foundation. I've talked with John Reel, the Director of Auxiliary Services, who is our fiscal agent, and he believes, along with conversations he's had with Mary Allen, that it would be possible to create an account that is restricted. So currently we have unrestricted accounts, right? The unrestricted account, for example, would be reserves. We could create a restricted account with $40,000 in it, the restriction being that it must be spent for the upgrades in the Student Center to facilitate the arena equipment. I did want to ask if there's anything else within the stipulations that you think needs to be there. It seems, the statement seems fairly clear insofar as how the spending is directed. It's directed by the Executive Board advisors or designee. It requires monthly reports. It requires that unspent funds be returned to reserves. It disallows commingling. I'm just going to yield back to our advisor.
Wasn't aware of that you had had that conversation. I think maybe in this bullet, I would just articulate that, like, $40,000 from reserves into a restricted account within our fiscal agent or something, within your budget. Or I would just indicate that it would be that restricted account so that you're safe and it all like clears out in the audit at the end. That's all. That's my recommendation. But I yield back to you.
Can I entertain a motion to modify under enacted 1.1 to read $40,000 from reserves into a restricted account as outlined in the stipulations under attachment 2 to facilitate the upgrades, dedicated to upgrades to facilitate the sports arena if and when it is relocated in the student center. And I mean, we can strike out the expiring. We don't really need it. It's outlined in the stipulations. I'm going to yield back to the chair. Sorry?
Do I have a so moved for that motion? So moved by Senator Mavros. Do I have a second? Seconded by Senator Candela.
It would basically read $40,000 from reserves into a restricted account as outlined in the stipulations for $40,000, that second attachment, dedicated to upgrades to facilitate the esports arena if and when it is relocated to the student center, and it cuts out that last bit because that's outlined within the stipulations.
So we are now in discussion on that motion. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing as there is no discussion, we will move into voting. All in favor, please raise your hand. All who oppose? And all who abstain. That passes 10-0-0. We are now back into discussion on the resolution as a whole. Our president.
Sorry, I've been waiting a minute for this. Sorry, jumping back to Forrest, you were talking about like what happens to the money that's not spent. In last year's reserves pool, Apocalypse Week, including the reserves pool, was $95,000 of allocated funding. They had about $78,000 in the reserves pool going to web, and that's just web. The reserves pool last year was over $250,000. That's a little high, but a lot of that money did end up going back. Like, they didn't use all that $95,000, but a lot of it did just go straight back. I yield.
Is there any more discussion for the resolution as a whole? All right. Seeing as there is no discussion, we will move into voting. All in favor, please raise your hand. All who oppose? And all who abstain. That passes 10-0-0. Moving on, we are now on Resolution 2425-27. Senator Cortez.
Motion to accept resolution number 2425.
Point of order, what?
Resolution?
Yes.
The whole resolution? Did
Yes.
everyone understand what they were voting for? It feels like there are some shocked faces that we just moved on. Are we all on the same page? No, we were too. Okay, apologies.
No, it's good. I did say before we moved into voting, if we were on discussion on the resolution as a whole, it's okay.
Point of information, he did say that, and then I talked about that thing with Forrest. Yeah, and then it went back to discussion on the whole bill, and then I suppose they voted on it. I was here.
Were you not on the same page too? Were you shocked by it?
No. I was just looking at the reserves pool from last year. That was over $250,000, which is kind of high. But
incredibly high and anomaly, for sure.
I yield.
All right. So, Senator Cortez, you have the floor again.
So motion to accept resolution number 2425-27.
Right, do I have a second? Seconded by Senator Novak. You're free to read.
Okay. We, the Senate of SUNY Poly Student Government at Utica, do hereby resolve, the purpose of this resolution is to freeze clubs that violated CFB policies and procedures, whereas each club that activates must abide by CFB policies and procedures. Clubs have violated CFB policies and procedures, Article 5, Section 4, enacted. The following clubs will be frozen for violating Article 5, Section 4, and can be unfrozen by attending 2 consecutive meetings, being Casual Debate Club and Game Design Club. Resolved. Be it finally resolved, the following clubs will be frozen for violating CFB policies and procedures, Article 5, Section 4, Casual Debate Club and Game Design Club. Attachments are Article 5, Section 4. Any clubs that have missed 2 CFB meetings during a semester shall be frozen by the student government at Utica Senate as requested by CFB Chair.
All right. Is there any discussion for this club freezing resolution? Senator Novak.
Can I motion to push back open forum to 1:55 p.m.?
I'm not going to hear that motion. I apologize. We can definitely get this done in that time unless there's a lot of discussion. Is there any discussion on this resolution as a whole? Senator Novak?
One thing I just want to point out, I don't believe this is really anyone's fault, but I think, and I mean, I know also it's not really like absolves these clubs, but one of the problems I noticed is this policies and procedures is not what's reflected in the club training and the advisor training. The club and advisor training clarify that it's supposed to be if you miss more than 2 meetings. And therefore, I do see as this bill at least a tiny bit problematic. I know in the policies and procedures, it does say if you miss 2 meetings. However, that's not the information we are telling our clubs and the club advisors who are there as staff supposed to be doing it. So I'm not entirely sure if it is the most fair to freeze the clubs then, if it is not reflecting the training, since most people, I assume, would look at the training and think, that is the correct information. That is what the policies and procedures represent. There's no need then for us to then look at the policies and procedures itself because, hey, why would the information be different? If that makes sense. I yield.
Our president.
So under the current CFP policies, I'm reading the one from the resolution just because it's easier, or the bill. Article 5, Section 6 states any clubs who have missed 2 CFP meetings during a semester shall be frozen by the student government at Utica Senate as requested by the CFP president. So it is 2 meetings. It doesn't specify consecutive unless it's in the rewritten ones. But it is 2 meetings. It's not like in excess of 2. It is 2 meetings.
I'm just saying that's what the club training says, and that's what I'm saying. It's just a bit unfair in my opinion, just because the fact that club training is wrong. I mean, I know it's not really anyone's fault, but it does kind of feel a bit unfair to be giving information that's not correct to the clubs. I mean, the club should still be going every meeting anyway, but I don't know. It's just something that we might want to think about for like this. If that makes sense.
I would like to entertain a motion to push back open forum by 10 minutes. I really thought that we'd be over this by now. I apologize. Do I have a so moved? So moved by Senator Mavros. Do I have a second? Seconded by Senator Chaput. Is there any more discussion for the resolution? Or sorry, is there any discussion to push back open forum 10 minutes? Seeing as there is no discussion, does anyone oppose unanimous consent? All right, that passes. We are now back into the resolution for freezing these clubs as a whole. Is there any more discussion? Senator Chaput.
May I ask CFP, what is the way that a club can be
Unfrozen?
Specified in the resolution.
Oh, thank you.
Is there any more discussion? Our advisor?
Do you think it would, I guess to the Senate, the CFP, do you all think it would be beneficial to add into the resolution how they could be unfrozen so that nothing could change? I'm going to yield to the president.
So under enacted, it states the following clubs will be frozen for violating Article 5, Section 4, and can be unfrozen by attending 2 consecutive meetings. I yield.
Is there any more discussion? Seeing as there is no more discussion, we will move into voting. All in favor, please raise your hand. All who oppose? And all who abstain. That passes 8-0-2. All right, we're now in open forum. Hooray! We did that for a minute. We saved us a minute. Does anyone have something for open forum? Senator Velez.
I just realized since we didn't pass those new policies and procedures, and there was a mention of having to gather a additional funding council, if I'm correct. And how were we able to approve the reserves pool we just did if that was additional funding? Kind of confused there. I yield to our treasurer.
So it's two different things, right? The reserves pool, we were
That's a
moving
valid
money
question.
into the extra funding requests line, which is just money that the club funding board or currently the extra funding council is allowed to disperse. The problem is CFB can't use it until they get an extra funding council. They can't use any of the, $32,000 now in that line. But it'll still be there, right? It'll still end up in there. It just, they won't be able to use it until they set up an extra funding council.
Our audience member.
So that Design Develop Club is doing a fundraiser, and they're doing College of Engineering merchandise for their club to do fundraising. And I just want to point that out. They're doing it this week, and I think next week is what they said. So if you're interested in College of Engineering merchandise, check them out.
Is there anything else for open forum? Senator Fisher.
I would like to add this morning, I was not impressed with the conditions of the sidewalk when I had to walk to class, especially early in the morning. Especially since the entire sidewalks were laced with ice, and I almost slipped about 10 times on the way to my class.
Senator Candela.
I actually did fall to add to that. I did fall this morning, so yeah.
Senator Novak.
Just adding this, I think there's a problem with all of these buildings when it comes to like anti-slip protection. Last night I almost fell walking into the library, and then when I left, that was outside the library at least. But then I almost I did fall when I was walking back into the student center last night. So I guess it's for safety facilities committee, but probably should be looking and putting in some sort of thing to prevent falling. We used to gas and water getting enveloped. I think that's the cause of the problem, but.
Oh, excuse me. Wildcat Media.
I noticed that some of the ADA buttons in some of the buildings that previously worked are not working anymore. So that's also safety facilities. I would suggest maybe someone go look. I don't remember which building it was, but I use those buttons a lot. So
I notice when they're broken. I yield to facilities.
So a few points I gotta make here now. So for the anti-slip mats that was discussed in our meeting last week, they said they will go around the buildings too and double check the ones they have out to, and they have been going around, and at the main buildings they've been going to, at all the entrances they've been going to those mats and swapping them out on a weekly basis for the most part with a fresh mat. For the ADA buttons, do you remember which ones exactly?
I think the CC ones are broken, but that's probably because it's under construction. Or, I mean, they should be. I think the CC ones are. And, one of there'll be two doors, and one of them, in the library, one of the first doors would work, but the second door wouldn't, or one of those things. I don't know. I just find that, problematic. I don't remember off the top of my head, but if I will, I'll tell you.
Okay, and then I was going to go into different note. Class gift committee, we have meetings now, 4 to 5 Mondays in the Student Center Theater.
Point of information, did I miss class gift committee and committee reports?
You did.
I did. I apologize. I'm so sorry. Our audience member.
I don't know if it's even possible to talk to the people who plow. They almost hit my car this morning when they were trying to plow, and then they hit someone else's car in the Mohawk parking lot. You can see the ding in the back of their truck. So yeah, thanks.
Senator Velez.
So there's cameras everywhere. Get that money. Get that bag. Free tuition.
Senator Maveris.
So let's go with the plowing safety facilities. They do. So it comes to a meeting, you can speak to the head directly, and you can mention that to them. Yield.
All right. Our treasurer.
To entertain a motion to introduce resolution number 2425-28 to the following week's agenda.
Do I have a so moved?
Point, I guess, of clarification. What is this agenda?
I'd be happy to read the resolution just for informational purposes. The resolution is titled Formal Reprimand, and it is basically, I'll just read the whole thing. Whereas the Club Funding Board has been wrongly distributing funds in absolute violation of its policies, and there has wrongly been funds in excess of $13,000 distributed to clubs in an unfair, irresponsible manner in blatant disregard of CFP policies, and so the SGU Treasurer wishes to formally reprimand themselves, the entirety of the Club Funding Board's Executive Board, and the SGU Advisors, so therefore be it enacted, the Student Government at Utica Senate considers and confirms the formal reprimand of the SGU Treasurer, SGU Advisors, and Club Funding Board Executives, and the Student Government at Utica Senate strongly encourages the Club Funding Board's Executives, the SGU Treasurer, and the SGU Advisors to be more diligent about following policy. Therefore, be it resolved, the individuals listed above will be formally reprimanded, and be it finally resolved, the officers and organizations of student government will stay in accordance with their mission's contractual duties and policies. Senator Novak.
What do you mean by reprimanded?
It's just a formal reprimand. Resolutions can be introduced just to communicate the opinion, desire of the student government Senate and the student government as a whole. It's really just a statement. It's nothing. It doesn't change policy. It's a resolution. It doesn't allocate funding. It doesn't freeze clubs. Okay. Senator Mavros.
So just for clarification, you're adding this on to next week's agenda.
That's
so
correct.
We can see it now. No voting on this resolution will happen today.
Right. I'd just like to introduce it into next week's agenda. I just wanted to read it during open forum.
Also, just a reminder, if you guys have points of clarification, information, anything like that, you can just say it. You don't need to be called on to say it. So with that said, we still, our treasurer did entertain a motion to bring this to the agenda next week. Do I have a so moved? So moved by Senator Byer. Do we have a second? Seconded by Senator Mavros. All right, is there any discussion for adding that to the agenda next week? Senator Velez.
Academic success and technology to next week's agenda too, in the committee reports?
I don't think you need to do that. I think that should just be, like, that could just be added by the secretary next week. Okay. So as a reminder, we are in a motion to add our treasurer's resolution to the agenda next week. Is there any more discussion on that?
Got the first meeting today, 4 to 5.
Right. Seeing as there is no discussion, we'll move into voting. Does anyone oppose unanimous consent? All right, that passes. Is there anything else for open forum? Our president.
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a so moved? So moved by Senator Fisher. Do I have a second? Seconded by Senator Zapata. Right. All in favor of adjourning, please raise your hand. All who oppose? And all who abstain. That passes 10-0-0.